So this session, ladies and gentlemen, is on natural gas, the road towards cleaner and prosperous future. And in fact, many of you might be aware that as per the Outlook 2016, which in fact is considered as a Bible for the energy world, renewables and the natural gas are the big winners in the race to meet the energy demand growth until 2040. And our Honorable Prime Minister also mentioned that we need to move over to a gas economy. So we look into this road towards cleaner and prosperous future. Joining us as a chair of the session, Mr. Toll Albanese, the Group CEO of Vedanta. Our other eminent speakers, Mr. Hamad Mubarak Al Muhnadi, the CEO of RasGas, Mr. Richard F. Durant, the Vice President, LNG, ExxonMobil Gas and Power Marketing Company, Texas. We have Mr. Frederick Bernard, the Chief Commercial Officer, GM&T, London. Mr. Ajay Sani, the Additional Secretary, Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas. Mr. Prabhat Singh, the CEO and Managing Director of Petronet LNG. Mr. James Rockall, the CEO and Managing Director, World LPG Association, France. Dr. R.K. Malhotra, the Director General of Petrofed. And our knowledge partner, Ms. Mary Hemmingsen, the Global Head LNG KPMG. So as we start the session, just briefly also introducing you how we have structured this session. Mary is going to be making the theme presentation, setting the tone and the context of our discussions. Thereafter, Mr. Tom is going to be taking over the chair of the session, inviting the speakers, and at the end we are going to be taking question answers. Any questions, please pen down your questions. Just raise your hand, we'll have our representatives collect the questions, pass it on to Mary, who's going to be moderating the Q&A part, and then we have a special presentation by Dr. R.K. Malhotra. So I hand over to Ms. Mary for setting the tone and the context of the session. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. I'm very pleased to be here and provide some initial comments and context for our morning panel. And we're going to explore some considerations on natural gas towards a natural gas in its role in clean energy outlined by your Prime Minister and Energy Minister yesterday. And as with my experience with India generally, there's this inherent pulse, and it's exciting to feel the pulse with so much momentum and potential. So as a quick flyover, and I was told this would work, there we go, I plan to cover some comments on gas and its role in clean energy systems, gas and the emerging global market trends, gas and customer market trends or consumer market trends, gas in the development of competitive markets, gas in Indian markets, and a bit of a roadmap for the future, again without being presumptive about your market. Okay. And we have a problem with advancing the slides. There we go. So, in terms of gas and its role in clean energy systems, I think there's a raging debate, at least in North America, about whether gas in energy systems is a sunset industry or a mere bridge to renewables. And I can tell you, as a former energy system planner from a hydro-based system, I know the role of gas and in terms of renewable resource and to support intermittent generation in an affordable way. And on that basis and experience, I think if it is a bridge, it would be a long one. And even that there's an ongoing role for gas as a vital, flexible, low-carbon resource to meet system requirements associated with intermittency, provide flexibility, and to really assist in optimizing the need for new infrastructure, avoiding stranded infrastructure, and even contribute to security and reliability. So I would say with a strong conviction that clean energy systems require both gas and renewables. And I'm not sure why this thing doesn't work. So, and I, like the EIA, Imagine that, see a role for both gas and renewables. And in particular, the EIA sees that natural gas has a key role and an associated demand rising by 50% by 2040, and in parallel with a similar growth for renewables. So both of them are expected to contribute 50% of growth in the future. And I duly note, though, that the role of gas and renewables will vary in different jurisdictions and be dependent on different policy considerations. So let's take stock, look out to the future, how this role of natural gas is taking shape. We already commented on the overall growth forecast for natural gas, so let's take stock of some of the segments of growth. So first of all, there is definitely lots of supply. So it's a really good time for buyers like India to be adding natural gas via LNG into their energy mix. And that gives buyer power, choice, and access to attractively priced short-term and spot market volumes. And on that front, there's currently 23% of the global production that's uncontracted and 105 MMTPA that's currently being built with expectations of adding to an oversupplied market that will be about 470 of excess production in the medium term. So there's certainly lots out there. Secondly, there is, I'd really like some help with this because it's not advancing. Secondly, there is growing trade. In the form of new buyers and suppliers, and once we get that slide up, you can see that. And there's set to be a step function increase in terms of the removal of destination clauses. And India definitely sits at the epicenter to receive LNG from suppliers east and west and at the ocean crossroads in an increasing re-export environment that will be propelled by further destination clause removal. So let's look at the trends shaping, and a little context is in order here, and I do hope they get the slide. So now it'll work? Great. Okay, there you see India at the epicenter of the growing trade. And then this slide, little context is in order. It's definitely an eye chart, and at the risk of hurting your eyes, I put it together deliberately to make two overall points. One is there's many dynamics shaping pricing, economics, and value drivers in the LNG industry, hence the density of the slide. And then if you start at the bottom, there's kind of a chicken and egg situation happening. So does the supplier proliferation and the diversification of supply and buyers drive over supply and choice, which in turn drives the market development and as outlets for choice and oversupply, which in turn drive buyer behavior? Or is the egg the buyer and the chicken the market development? Or is it that both and? So let's just take a thread of the relationship. So what you have is you have buyer power happening right now, capitalizing on the supplier's need to place these volumes. And with consolidation of buyers at 16% of total demand, there's increased power of buyers to demand flexibility in terms of delivery and location. And this needed flexibility is increasing the short-term and spot volumes, which have reached almost 30% of the trade globally. That's leading market development into hedgeable instruments, derivative markets, locational swaps, and hedges. So you see that in the market column. And a significant new trend back to buyer options is that with the uncontracted volume set to expire, there is going to be almost 45 MMTPA expiring before 2020, which could be available to savvy buyers at a variable cost price. And add this on to dampened Asian demand and the change in the Japanese power supply stack that has the potential to take out 25 MMTPA from the power market and place it into markets, there's certainly a lot going on there in terms of those dynamics. So where's all this supply going? Well, there's lots of flexible supply, and coincident with key trends in consumer markets that are favoring the entry of low-cost flexible gas. So if you just look at a couple of different markets in terms of the UK, that's coming out of coal, and there's a significant role for gas to play alongside renewables, that both and again. And on the heat market, the UK is heavily dependent on gas and looks to develop the gas distribution system more. India, the gas share of the primary energy mix is currently at 7%. It's well below the international average, and we heard your Prime Minister identify a target of 15% in the medium term, so definitely a lot of growth and place for this gas supply. And after demand growth on the bulk sectors being power and fertilizer, the next wave of growth is really likely to be in the unregulated sectors and transportation. Again, we heard that yesterday, and a really exciting opportunity about the displacement of captive diesel as well. So lots of demand for that supply to go, and then even looking forward to urbanization and district cooling, CHP, and commercial residential use of gas. And the U.S., all I'm going to say is who knows after the election of Donald Trump, but that will remain to be charted. But there's, within these dynamics, there's a lot of uncertainties about demand and the potential for earlier tightening. So there's lots of supply available, you heard that. There's also a potential to be really complacent in this oversupply period and assume that'll be available for the foreseeable future. And there's some key uncertainties that could actually trigger an earlier tightening of that supply overhang right now, similar to what we heard about yesterday from the director of OPEC, and that Daniel Yergin commented on. So it's clear now that low prices are driving demand. There's significant elasticity in the market, and at the same time, there's massive deferrals of LNG projects that have long lead times to bring back to market. So we're really setting up for that commodity cycle to increase and prevail upon us. Now, the good news is that with this increased trade and both buyer and seller motivated needs for markets, there's considerable momentum in terms of the development of more competitive gas markets, and with pricing and hedging instruments based on a transition to pricing models that reflect gas's movement pricing away from oil. So a quick taking stock of the developments is you saw just at the beginning of this year the first trade hosted by the Singapore Sling Exchange. And if we look to the precedent of the European experience, you can anticipate if this takes root that it'll have far-reaching implications on the market price for natural gas. And really in Europe, as we know, it launched this whole wave of price negotiations to align the price under the long-term contracts and a transition to gas-based pricing models. So in terms of looking at that, there's a couple of prerequisites that really propelled that to occur, and that was gas-on-gas competition, unbundling and liberalization of markets, and then a policy reversal on the limited reseller diversion. So I'm actually leaving here to go to Japan tomorrow, and I say watch Japan and how that unfolds with its liberalization momentum of its power markets and the review that's currently underway with destination clauses. And just quickly, looking forward, what will the development of this futures market and LNG hub trading look like for Asia? And done a bit of handicapping of some of the leading candidates there. So you see Singapore, Japan, and China, and the colors are obviously meant to represent how they what their attributes are relative to some of these requirements for those trading hubs to take root, and just a bit of a picture of how Japan is progressing on that front with the series of steps that it's taking going forward. So, to conclude, let's summarize with gas and a high-level roadmap for India for some of the critical elements to enable the creation of adequate infrastructure, appropriate markets, and institutional frameworks. And it's a pretty compelling and obvious recipe, but sometimes elusive. So it's really about, with the increased imports, encouraging more market making and supporting strategies to penetrate the markets that exist here. It's about infrastructure investment, obviously getting those import terminals built and timely completion of expansion capacity. And then it's unlocking a series of structural constraints around pipeline pricing, contracting, the rigidities in the end-use market and lack of liquidity, and integrated market development. So who knows, will India host the trading hub going forward, just because it has such massive momentum going on. So I look forward to hearing the views of the rest of the panel, and I'll turn it over to Tom.
Thank you, Mary.
Before Mr. Tom takes over, just two requests I wanted to make. One, you requested not to carry your tea and coffee inside the hall. It is not permitted, so very humble request. Please, in case you're wanting to have tea, you requested to move out. Second is that that is in the interest of all our speakers. We also have a time clock, so request you to please adhere to the time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I've got a little bell here too in case it is necessary. So we have now a list of 8 distinguished speakers, and we'll start off with Mr. Hamad Mubarak Al-Wahabdi. So over to you. Thank you.
It's okay. Can you just... It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. You don't have to worry about it. Okay. Assalamu alaikum. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, good morning to you all. It's certainly a great honor for me to be addressing this great gathering. Qatar and India, as well as RasGas and Petronet, have enjoyed excellent relationship for many years. The bond is so great between our two countries that when I was a child, the Indian rupee was used as the official currency of Qatar. This bond was further strengthened and enhanced in the year 1999 when RasGas and Petronet signed our first LNG sales and purchase agreement, which was at that time the largest SPA to be signed, totaling 7.5 million tons per annum for a long contract of 25 years. Since then, RasGas continues to grow its presence in India with sales not only to Petronet but also directly to GAIL, GSPC, and Reliance. And the list of companies continues to grow. India is a compelling market. In the year 2016, India will become the second largest buyer of spot and short-term LNG cargoes, in addition to being the world's number 4 largest importer. The increased demand is the result of a clear choice by both consumers and the government of India. LNG is affordable, efficient, and environmentally sustainable. It is the ideal fuel for the world's fastest growing economy. Despite this, natural gas contributes only about 7% of India's energy mix. Coal and liquid fuels continue to meet the majority of India's energy needs. Those native to Delhi are well aware of the impact of coal, diesel particulates in the air. While it is clear that coal is cheap, the price paid in terms of pollution and healthcare is unacceptable. Liquid fuels clearly have their place in any growing economy. However, natural gas presents a cheaper and a cleaner alternative. Gas use continues to grow in India, and the Indian government agrees, as was clearly stated in the opening address by the Honorable Prime Minister Modi yesterday. The recently launched Gas for India campaign is an excellent initiative to promote the use of gas in the country. This, combined with the pooling schemes in power and fertilizer sectors and the wide-reaching Make in India campaign, are supporting India's transformation into a country powered by clean, reliable, gas-based energy. Our partners at Petronet and the public sector utilities are doing a wonderful job of advocating gas, including the key initiative of LNG trucks loading, bunkering, and support for smart cities. India continues to lack infrastructure to support a gas-based economy, with many LNG receiving terminals and pipelines still on the drawing board. We are excited to see the progress of Mundra and Ennore. However, in order to unlock the demand created by an economy growing exponentially, more facilities are required. And in order for India to truly move to a gas-based economy, the lack of pipeline infrastructure, particularly on the East Coast, together with challenging regulations, needs to be addressed. Albert Einstein once said, "The hardest thing in the world is understanding income tax." Until very recently, the same might be said about taxes in India. The government must be applauded for introducing the GST. However, we must ask why LNG and natural gas is excluded from its provisions while LPG, naphtha, and fuel oil are included. The exclusion of natural gas promotes complexity and impacts the overall competitiveness of gas in India. Taxes also hinder gas transiting across states, building financial barriers to a truly national grid. So our business is not without challenges, and RosGas is very aware of the expectations of this key market. Over the past 5 years, we have seen a shift in customers' expectations regarding price, contractual flexibility, and indexation. And we have also seen that customers now have preference for shorter-term contracts. RasGas is leading the way in developing LNG contract based on the realities of this market. We're working hard to create a well-balanced contracts with greater flexibility and terms that are mutually beneficial for both ourselves and our valued customers. A good example of this came across at the turn of this year when RasGas and Petronet were able to proactively address a potential contractual issue. We agreed a solution that preserved the overall value of the contract while providing customers with greater flexibility. And we entered into a second SPA for 1 million tons per annum, further building on the existing long-term relationship. Our established infrastructure, industry-leading expertise, proven track record in terms of safety and reliability, and of course, a well-established relationships with customers make RasGas uniquely positioned to meet the ever-changing needs of this dynamic marketplace. Qatar's strategic location is a major advantage for RasGas and its customers in India. It only takes 3 days to ship LNG from Ras Laffan to the west coast of India. And while geographic proximity is certainly a consideration, we know that our customers also look for reliability, availability, and flexibility of supply, and we strive to meet these expectations. We at RasGas are proud of our record of reliability and on-time delivery to our customers. This reliability is embedded in our core values, and it is this ability to balance our customers' needs for flexibility with a guarantee of supply security that makes RasGas an industry leader. Ladies and gentlemen, we salute India's commitment to a gas-based economy, and we are naturally excited by the infrastructure developments that are occurring across this magnificent country. The state of Qatar looks forward to growing and strengthening its long-term relations with our friends in India. And I look forward to working together with you to build relationships that helps us deliver clean, sustainable, and reliable energy to homes and businesses across this nation. Thank you very much.
So we will now have our next speaker. Thank you very much for that. We have now Mr. Richard Garant, VP of LNG for ExxonMobil.
Well, good morning. It's always exciting to be here in India and see firsthand the economic growth and development that's taking place. The evidence is everywhere, and it is very impressive. Now, given India's expanding influence on global energy markets, Petrotech has become an important event for all of us in industry, and I am honored to have the opportunity to speak to you today. Now, it's no secret that as we head into 2017, the energy industry is weathering some significant changes. From an LNG perspective, we have witnessed the overall supply of LNG surpassing demand and the resulting imbalance putting pressure on prices. Multiple analysts predict that this oversupply situation will remain for the near term. Now, I've worked in LNG most of my 35-year career with ExxonMobil, and I have seen plenty of ups and downs in supply, demand, and pricing. In fact, back in 1997, the Asia financial crisis created a similar market environment where we saw reduced energy demand and prices for LNG falling considerably. In working with our partners in Qatar at the time, we knew we had to expand the LNG market beyond our largest customers in Japan and Korea. We needed to reach out to other countries and other regions. So we progressed our LNG supply discussions with India to develop and enhance the country's long-term energy and economic security. By collaborating with key stakeholders in India, we were able to develop a commercial structure that worked for everyone. In 1998, the Indian government created Petronet as a vehicle to enable constructing import terminals and making the commercial agreements to bring LNG first at Dahej and now at Kochi. In 1999, at a low point in the cycle, now we're talking $8 and $10 crude oil prices when I say low in the cycle. So we had a recent low in the cycle that we thought 25 to 30 was low. Back those days, it was very low, and it was very painful. And during that period, when some in the industry began pulling back, Petronet and Rosgas executed the groundbreaking sales and purchase agreement to become the first project to supply LNG to the India market. At that time, it was the largest LNG sale in history in terms of volume, as Hamid just said. Now, the relationship we began with India continues today, and the Rosgas ExxonMobil partnership currently provides 8.5 million tons per annum of LNG to India, and ExxonMobil providing an additional 1.4 million tons from the Gorgon project from Australia. Now, I tell this story to set the stage for my presentation today. LNG is a cyclical business, and as we reflect on today's market environment, it is important to remember that the world's oversupply of LNG will not last forever. And in fact, we anticipate a return to a more balanced LNG market in the future, and we will start to see the need for buyers to back new LNG projects. Those LNG buyers who have a reputation of high quality and reliability will have a strong advantage in the future. Now, there are a number of reasons why ExxonMobil believes LNG has long-term growth potential. Each year, we conduct a very comprehensive study of the global energy marketplace and publish those findings in our Outlook for Energy. Our most recent estimate, that's the biggest driver in increased energy demand through the year 2040, will be economic growth among the developing nations in Asia, Latin America, and Africa. As individuals in developing countries seek higher standards of living, we can expect to see increase in industrial activity, urban development, and much higher use of appliances like computers and air conditioners. And this will require the use of more energy, especially electricity. India and China are among the countries that will experience the highest rates of economic growth, which drives energy demand. And we anticipate that the per capita GDP for India and China will more than triple between now and 2040. The fuel source that will play the largest role in supporting this growth will be natural gas. We expect the global natural gas demand will increase 50% between 2014 and 2040. Now, as we all know, natural gas is abundant worldwide. But despite rising gas production in recent years, most notably in the shale regions of the United States, by 2040, almost 75% of the estimated recoverable natural gas resources around the globe will still remain unproduced. And thanks to human ingenuity and advances in technology, we continue to develop new ways to access even more of the world's natural gas resources. Now, based upon these facts, when we look at the future, we see many more potential LNG customers. The global gas trade will grow, as Mary talked about earlier, and the LNG industry will connect worldwide supply and demand, creating a more competitive marketplace. By 2040, the worldwide LNG market is expected to triple in size to growing to more than 690 million tons per annum. Now, where does India fit in this picture? The LNG market can be viewed in 4 different categories: established markets, new LNG buyers, emerging markets, and innovative LNG initiatives. When you put all these categories together, all of these buyers will one day be competing with one another for the LNG supply. Established market countries such as Japan, Korea, Taiwan, India, and China, they should all experience steady growth in LNG imports over the next decade or so. New buyers consist of countries like Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, Pakistan, and Singapore. They will experience the fastest rate of growth in LNG demand through 2025, nearly 8 times of what they imported in 2014. We also see emerging market countries such as Vietnam, Philippines, and Bangladesh. And finally, there will be new regional market buyers coming online that are accessible to producers east of Suez, such as Jordan, Bahrain, South Africa, and Egypt. In developing these new and emerging market areas, we're beginning to see innovative LNG initiatives beyond the traditional LNG to power agreements, and these include LNG to small scale, LNG to bunkering fuel for marine transportation, and things that you've heard from Petronet, the LNG to ground transportation. The challenge for LNG producers is to put together a viable and financeable value chain to accommodate the growing traditional LNG demand while providing flexible solutions to meet the expanding range of buyer needs. At ExxonMobil, we're meeting this challenge by fostering strategic relationships that enable us to deliver value, gain alignment with our partners, and create viable long-term projects that benefit all parties. Our recent agreements with Kogas and JERA and Golar Gempower in Brazil are examples of these types of cooperative relationships. Now, meeting the growing demand for LNG will not be easy, and it will require significant investment and cooperation. Despite new LNG projects currently under construction or in final investment decision stage, an estimated 175 million tons per annum of additional LNG will be needed by 2030. And building this infrastructure will be extremely capital intensive, given that each new project takes 6 to 7 years to develop all the commercial agreements, do the engineering and construction. Buyers and sellers need to begin talking now about new sales and purchase agreements, even during this very challenging oversupply period. Now, under these circumstances and given the risk involved, financing can be a major issue. Without strong value chains and balanced allocation of risk amongst all the parties, funding these new projects can be a roadblock to future investments. Investors and developers like ExxonMobil, commercial banks, export credit agencies, all require durable commitments from creditworthy off-takers before they're willing to invest the multi-billion dollars that it's required. So therefore, strong buyer relationships based on shared trust and confidence in one another to honor commitments and contracts, including through difficult times, continues to make the difference in the LNG industry. Trust is critical. High-quality buyers with strong reputation for working with producers will find that they have a competitive advantage. And governments play a role in laying the foundation for strong buyer-seller relationships. Government policies and guidance must support the long-term durability of the contract structures, pricing, and terms. Here in India, there has been a very pro-gas, pro-growth framework that has helped attract investment, and the country's openness to build LNG terminals and infrastructure has helped accomplish the economic goals. According to IMF World Economic Outlook, India is one of the fastest growing countries in the world, with GDP growth averaging nearly 7% since year 2000. And India is expected to even see greater growth in the years ahead. But in order for India to maintain its reputation as pro-growth, pro-gas, its policies need to continue to support an overall investment climate. I'd like to close today by reflecting once again on my experience of bringing LNG to India. It's great to be here with my colleague from Rosgas, Hamid Mubarak Ahmadi, to share our story of how Rosgas joint venture brought LNG to India. Initially, many people, and there's many of the old friends here in the audience today, there were many that criticized us and were very skeptical at the time. And there were some who said rather emphatically that it would never happen. And moreover, it could never happen. But 2 decades later, the shipments that regularly sail into Dahej prove over and over again just how wrong they were. Today, India is a strong buyer in the LNG marketplace, importing significant volumes, as you heard earlier. The country's LNG experience has provided a measure of energy security that will support continued economic growth for many decades to come. Compared to many countries, given the circumstances at the time, India's LNG startup was truly amazing. And when I think back on that experience, it's clear to me that each of the interested parties took great business risk in beginning that LNG journey. The Rosgas joint venture between Qatar Petroleum and ExxonMobil made significant investments in the upstream and the construction of LNG trains to support, at the time, the 7.5 million ton sale. The investors and off-takers of Petronet put their credit on the line, but they knew their market because of their relationships with their customers and our relationships with them. We all made it work. I'm proud of the relationship we've built with our partners here in India. As we move forward, we sincerely hope to have the opportunity to continue to serve the people of India as we look forward to meeting the country's need for affordable, reliable energy in the years to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Mr. Frederick Bernard, Chief Commercial Officer, GM&T London.
Distinguished guests, honorable partners and friends, on behalf of Gazprom and Gazprom Marketing and Trading, I'm going to unveil some of the mysteries of the hubs, which might or might not be applicable to India as the market grows and matures. Can we have it on screen? Yeah. GMT, Gazprom Marketing and Trading, is, as the name says, one of the principal marketing and trading entities of Gazprom, a group of 13 companies across the world, mostly based in London and Singapore, though. We have been quite for some time a good partner and of India and Indian buyers on oil as well as LNG and LPG, thriving with some very deep relationships with GAIL and all others like Indian Oil as well. We also helped recommission the Dabhol terminal in 2013 and are quite pleased with our trading achievements on the spot market with many buyers here over the years. The hub's pictures from Europe are an integral part of the gas markets there. It has not been the case over history, but pictures in 2005. NBP and the lesser traded markets across Europe traded approximately 600 BCM of gas. That's about the US gas market, the size of the US gas market, and about the peak producing capacity of Gazprom. So fairly large, but not sufficient, even at this size, for enabling a proper hub and pricing to function. In 2015, that has increased quite a lot to approximately more than 30 times the size of exports of Gazprom to Europe, and fairly large over two principal places of trading, the NBP in the UK and the TTF on the continent. So what are some of the characteristics of those hubs? Well, in Europe, as you can see on the left pictures, on the left side of the picture, it's a complex set of interacting hubs, in fact, related by pipeline capacity, and each one having its own rules, but mostly coherent, though there are some improvements to be made by led by the European Union and the grids, the different grids across the countries. It's still too much of a country-based system, but it is evolving across European Union to develop an interacted sort of link of hubs. In my view, hubs only function properly if they are a proper marketplace, meaning that the gas exchanges, sales and purchase are priced, and not just exchanges like we see mostly in Spain, but here in the continent and the UK, they are effectively priced through NBP and TTF price driver, or the Zeebrugge hub as well. And they obey mostly to local supply and demand imbalances over the short term, and though driven by obviously longer term supply and demand factors. In the US, it's an even more mature system, but still the same characteristic of interacting regional hubs. And here, with the centerpiece around the Henry Hub, which is the principal price driver for the US market, though there are some very significant variations of prices between the different regions. That has been built over time, led also and improved from the production side, the indigenous production side in the US, and all the parties have had effectively the same growth of their either production or their consumption, led around the same system of interacting hubs, giving right signals for future investments, either in interconnecting capacity or in pipeline or in production developments, or in future consumption through assets. In India, there are some excellent prerequisites which are met, especially the size of the market and the potential growth of it. If we project ourselves 3-5 years forward, there are multiple supply options, but though there are some limitations, and principal one is the infrastructure. A hub is not a financial instrument. It is very different from a pricing index, like we talked about GKM index for LNG in Asia. That's not at all a hub. It's a price report to Platts that barely functions as sometime a pricing mechanism for some spot LNG cargoes. But a properly functioning hub needs to be built over physical assets, essentially interconnections, ideally storage, but in India it's rather limited. It's provided through flexibility on LNG supplies. And all that with the different side of demand and balancing demand and supply over time, especially in the very short term. The next day is usually what is being traded most. So there are some limitations. Obviously, as was said before, the principal one is also regulation, sometimes taxation. In Europe, some of that has been lessened through intra-communitary VAT mechanism. It's a tool to balance uncertainty, so that can be helpful for the growth of the Indian market looking forward. But it is imperative that it's a mechanism for clearing deals in the short term, essentially forming a price. So it's purchase and sale, not exchanges of gas around same type of contracts and same type of maturity developments and terms of transactions. And obviously sanctity of contract and purchase and sale is quite strict there, as well as guarantees being put towards usually the exchange that organize this hub system. As a conclusion, gas hubs take a long time to develop. Taken in the US, I don't know exactly, but principally from the early 90s, and in Europe at least 15 years to sort of function in a liquid and reasonably transparent way so that contracts can be built around those. Third-party access is absolutely critical to the good functioning of hubs in import, in storage, in transportation. And as I said, standardization of physical and in due time financial contracts is absolutely critical, thus enabling some form of transparency in price reporting, in exchanges, as well as in the ability to be paid or to pay in an efficient way for the gas. Active market participants are required. It cannot just be one-sided, only consumers or only producers. Otherwise it doesn't work because it requires too many speculators in between to make up for the liquidity. So properly balanced one takes time to build so that it can afford to be relied upon in matters of liquidity and indexation. From being regional, then they tend to interact, as we've seen in Europe and in the US, and start to have an influence on global trade, either to attract imports or to simply interconnect prices across regions and possibly across the world. There is no gas hub really, or no LNG hub in Asia. They are tentative to have some price markers, as I said, but these are not hubs. Because there is no physical exchange of the gas or the LNG around such pricing. And that starts to be happening a little bit. It will take time. In the meantime, LNG contracts remain principally driven by crude indexes like GCC and Brent, as well as gas indexes like NBP or Henry Hub sometimes. But I tend to believe that the evolution of the gas market in India provides an opportunity for such hubs to develop. It's a nation of merchants, and therefore the ability to understand that pricing mechanism around supply and demand is phenomenal given the growth of the market. In light also of India's importance in the market, global marketplace, it is possible that such hub and the pricing associated with that might in the future become one of the principal drivers for Asian flows, meaning a global influence. And we, as my colleagues, we look forward to the growth of this market, whether through some form of hub developments or through traditional negotiations and developments. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Now we will hear from Mr. A.P. Swarney, the Additional Secretary, Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas.
A very good morning to all of you. It's good to start the morning of the second day with natural gas and all the efforts that are going in to popularize it and to increase the share of natural gas in India's energy basket. In India, in spite of a lot of efforts in the past, natural gas currently remains extremely low at 6.5% of the energy basket. And coal, because coal is so abundant in the country, accounts for as much as 56% of the energy basket. Now, with rising concern about carbon dioxide emissions, with our commitments in COP21. I think there is a greater realization and a sharper policy focus on everything that can be done to popularize natural gas and help it grow to a much, much larger percentage. As far as the government is concerned, the focus is on all the three important parts of the value chain. Development of the gas sources, both domestic and the import terminals to be able to bring in LNG. Development of the gas pipeline infrastructure and the secondary distribution networks. And also development of the gas consuming markets and helping them migrate from other fuels to gas, especially in case of the fertilizer sector, the power sector, other major industries, and also developing the CGD networks and CNG stations across cities and the highways. I think we, in the early part of this year, a significant decision was taken after consulting some of the global energy majors and the Indian experts on freeing up the pricing and providing marketing freedom for natural gas produced from deep sea, ultra deep waters and difficult areas, the high pressure, high temperature zones. ONGC was already producing from, it in fact started production from one such zone, and already the first contracts are in place. This has also helped us clinch investment decisions. ONGC announced a major investment decision in the KG Basin, and we are expecting many more. So this is helping us to again kickstart major investment in production of gas. Our reserves now are more in the offshore and many of them in the deep sea area, and this policy is helping many entities to bring forward their investment decisions. The LNG terminals are expanding capacity, and we expect currently the LNG terminals are primarily on the west coast. We expect at least 3 significant LNG terminals to also take shape on the east coast, bringing a much larger area potentially within reach of the regasified LNG. These are the terminals in Ennore, Kakinada and Dhamra on the east coast. For a significant time, actually, the 15,000 kilometers that we already have in the national gas grid was not getting augmented. Though authorization had been issued by the concerned regulatory board to build another 14,500 kilometers of pipelines, many of these projects were remaining static, and we did not see a movement in these for a few years. Again, this year, major efforts are being made on the policy and financing front by the government to again restart the cycle of investment, especially the Pradhan Mantri Urja Ganga Yojana is a huge pipeline which will connect the entire eastern segment and bring natural gas, the RLNG, to a number of states in the eastern India. These cover areas with very high population, the UP, Bihar, Jharkhand, West Bengal, Orissa. All of these states get RLNG, and this would also help us revive some of the anchor customers, the fertilizer plants and other industrial units in these areas. A good number of cities in this zone will also get connected. So this actually brings in a large part of the missing national gas grid. We still have to make efforts to connect up the rest of East India and connect it to the complete our national gas grid. On the CGD networks front, around 33 new cities have been approved in the last 3 years, and 228 more cities are planned to be included in the CGD network as we build our pipelines. We found that in both the fertilizer sector and the power sector, there were difficulties relating to the consumption of natural gas. Last year, 2 schemes were initiated, one for fertilizer sector and one for the power sector. In the fertilizer sector, the problem was that the many units were having an allocation of domestic gas at a much lower price, and fertilizer units were reluctant to go in for RLNG, which was available at a much higher price. So a scheme of pooling the gas price was evolved, and this has helped us ensure the supply of natural gas by combining the available quantities of domestic natural gas and imported RLNG, pooling the price and making it available to fertilizer plants across the country at a uniform distributed price. This has helped the fertilizer sector, especially the urea production plants, to focus entirely on their production and not have any issues or concerns regarding the availability of natural gas. It has helped us as a country step up the production of urea quite significantly and increase the offtake of gas. Similarly, a scheme was introduced for reviving the stranded gas power plants. This has met with some success, and we are currently trying to take a further look as to how we can improve its effectiveness, because still we have a huge stranded gas power based capacity available in the country. Within the country currently, an effort is also going on to replace, wherever possible, the other fossil fuels with natural gas, and incentives are being thought of for that purpose. I think India is not just the third largest energy consumer, it also represents a huge investment opportunity. We believe that as much as $136 billion investment is required in the oil and gas market by 2025, and it's a $100 billion target investment by 2022. We have major investment opportunities in the pipeline and completion of the gas grid, in regasification terminals, and in building up the CGD networks across the length and breadth of the country. We invite you, on behalf of the Government of India, I would invite all the stakeholders to participate actively and be present in this growing market. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will now hear from Mr. Prabhat Singh, CEO and MD of Petronet LNG.
Good morning, everyone. And whatever I have to say in the short time which I have, I will break up my part into three different sections. First, I'll try and tell you a story which has been told by one of my colleagues, and it is so compelling and so impressive, I could not resist not telling you that story. Second part is going to be my own analysis and critique on the business model, how it has changed in terms of the shale oil and shale gas which has happened and how it is affecting the market. And the third part will be that how a new vertical is being launched. Pardon me if I make some mistakes, but the trend is going to be very, very, I would say, compelling. What he said to me, and make the corrections, the geologists who are sitting in the room, he said that the kitchen which prepares all the hydrocarbon inside the soil, actually when it is being done, if you consider it as 100% which is being made there, out of that, when it starts migrating, it is 70% which gets captured in the tight reservoirs, tight deposits, etc. Only 30% migrates through the interstices into a pattern where it goes and then gets captured in a reservoir where it finds a seal coat, etc., and it gets captured there. So out of that 30% which has migrated, it is 70% which gets discovered. You actually find that because of your own seismic activities, etc., which you do. So if you do the maths, 70% of 30% is 21%. Out of this 21%, when you are actually trying to discover and you wanted to capture, it is only 70% which comes into your hand, and therefore 21%, 70% of that makes it 14%. And when you look at oil, the recovery in a reservoir is by and large 30-35%. So if you add that, you are left with 4%. So what he actually indicated, and it came as a, revelation to me, he said that what for the last 150 years or so we have been thriving on oil and we've been thriving on gas has actually been from that 4% which we've actually been able to tap. Now let's come back to the original part where you have 70% in the tight deposits. That perhaps is what shale is all about. And now when you have gotten a technology which is going to break through, whether it is through horizontal directional drilling or hydrofracking or chicken leg, etc., whatever, you are actually having a recovery of as low as only 15%. But 15% of 70% is around 10%. So a feel-good factor is that what the world has been thriving about at 4%, today you have nearly 2.5 times more gas and oil available. So be happy that it's going to be there and it's going to it is going to last our own life as well as our kids, etc., and many more. The second part on the shale oil and gas, now when you look at how this whole thing is happening in the US, the whole concept of shale oil and shale gas has happened is that there are very small players who have come into the picture. If you look at it very keenly, the majors, etc., have moved in very late into the system to be able to now capture so that they are not left out. But ultimately, the analysis is that there are small players who are actually playing this game, and there are tens of thousands of people who are doing it. And there is a buffer. Now, even with the OPEC saying that we can actually have a cut of around 1.2 million barrels or so, today there is a huge buffer which is available with the people in the US, with the small players, who can address the market at a very short time interval. Virtually so, if you really see, on a daily basis there is this adjustment. They can actually address the market as and when the prices go higher and low. Sometime back the prices, even before this OPEC cut had happened, went up to nearly $49, $50 at that point of time. Suddenly there was a news item that there are 10 more rigs operating from today onwards. So the idea, and then immediately the prices went down, etc. Some production happened. The beauty of this tight deposits perhaps is that unless you push it, it will not come out. And if you leave it alone, it will stand by there. It's unlike a conventional reservoir where you actually, once you puncture it, you have to do something with it, otherwise the reservoir health and the productivity, etc. are going to be affected. So here, there is a particular concept where there are 10,000 people working on it. They are working on lease which they have taken by drawing loans, EMIs, and therefore if they don't drill, they are going to have to return their lease. Effectively, it is driving them to work on operating profits to such an extent that in the SERA week in Houston some time back, IHS had done a study, and that study indicated that out of the 1200 odd TCF of gas which is available in US, nearly 850 TCF of gas at that point of time when I think oil was around 48 or 47, was viable at less than $2. And there was 80 TCF of gas which was actually available for free, because something there in the US, I think there's a law that you cannot flare anything for more than 30 days or so. So if anybody wants to produce oil and there is gas coming in, there is a containment issue and therefore it becomes an evacuation product. So in that context, if you see, the control of how much to produce and how much not to produce is actually now not with anybody. These guys, the 10,000 guys who are there, are going to produce. They have to really make their own liquidity of cash available, and therefore whether the 13 odd countries come together and talk about it and say that okay, let's do it this way, that way, it is in a way to me a kind of being in a denial mode, not to recognize that the controls have shifted basically. So this, I thought, that is the prime concern, and which is now giving abundance of gas in the market as we are being talked about. And the concern is that it will be available for the next 5 years or 6 years time. I think if this model is working, it is there to stay for a longer time. Now where it stabilizes is a $1,000,000 question, but definitely whatever we are seeing today on a $50 barrel crude, etc., plus minus somewhere it should remain for a reasonably long time. And therefore the question comes up here in India, being a buyer's market, this is the golden period. So make hay while the sun shines, and literally so when I am saying sun is shining very hard, because the renewables are coming very close now, and there could be a situation that in the next 7-10 years time, at least the liquid fossil fuels may lose their sanctity at all. Yes, gas is going to stay because there is a complementing fuel, and it will take time because sun cannot shine in the night, something has to be done there. So we would actually be available, and therefore it is very important to develop the infrastructure, and thanks to the Indian government, the way Mr. Sahni mentioned, there's huge effort is being made to actually develop pipelines, regas terminals. There is no dearth, no matter how much you develop, it is still less, because globally, at least I am dealing in regas terminals, I can say not more than 40-45% capacity is being used which is available, and world is thriving on that. So here in India also today we have 20-23 million tons of capacity as of today which is working, and we are importing nearly 18.5 million tons of LNG. So we are way ahead of the world average. It requires a lot many more regas terminals which can be compensated for, and therefore there shouldn't be, we should not even bat an eyelid to really see. The important part is how to see that the capacity on a continuous basis is utilized for the pipelines at least, because that is where the infrastructure not coming up and capex not coming up is a point of concern for the developer. There is no dearth of money in the market. There are people who are ready to invest. But how you really see once the commissioning has been done to be able to go about, that is where we need to see. Now quickly coming to the last part where I am saying there is a vertical being developed, and the important part is 70 million tons of LNG, 70 million tons of diesel is today being consumed in the country, out of which nearly 28 million tons is actually going into the long distance heavy duty trucks and buses. And when you really look at this concept, today world over it is coming up. We have launched one bus recently in Trivandrum. This is added up, there are every year nearly around 200,000 trucks which come on the road additional, and therefore what I am suggesting is that we do not touch the current consumption of diesel etc. which is being done in terms of the current fleet, but look at the only additional part which we are talking about. So 200,000 trucks for the taking, 40,000 buses coming up for the taking. There are many more. All the other vehicles can also be converted, but once we aim initially for these only, there is nearly 7 million tons of LNG market which is being created, which is today's consumption in India is around 39 million tons. So 7 million tons is roughly around 18% of the market which can be jumped. And this can be done in a very quick short time of around a year or 2 years. So I am saying that we must go all out. All the organizations, Petronet has been in touch with IOC, BPC, HPC, GAIL, etc. We are looking at a pan-India covering of this particular concept, and we would like that in China, when you have nearly around 300,000 trucks which are running today, at least in the next 5 to 7 years' time, we should be doing nearly around 200,000 trucks. 200,000 trucks itself is nearly around, which will give us with the added peripheral business which will come up, would be to the tune of around 8 to 10 million tons. So that is something which is to be, and it is economical. If you look at the COP21 commitments which we have made to bring it down from 2005 levels by around 33-35% up to 2030, as of today when we are there and going forward, this particular fleet I am talking about, if converted, could yield as high as nearly 2.5% of the whole concept. So we would be very better off, and the prices also, the savings is nearly around 30 to 40% on a per kilometer running basis. So there is much more to say, but time is running out. So I would say that this is a new vertical which we can create, and I can take further questions during the question hour time, because there is a lot of things which I would have wanted to say. But excuse me that I don't have time now to say that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much for those lively comments. Mr. James Rockwell, CEO, Managing Director, World LPG Association.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to you. I'd like to thank firstly the organisers for inviting me to speak, and I hope that what I have to say to you this morning is going to be valuable to you. I want to talk about gas. Obviously, the panel is about gas, but I'm not going to talk about natural gas. I'm going to talk about LPG. And I would like to say from the outset that when we talk here about gas, I would like us all to consider gas in its entirety, from natural gas right the way through to LPG. And my presentation, I think, will explain why, because I think there are a lot of synergies in our industry. The LPG industry, many of you probably know as cooking gas, but it's not an industry that just sits quietly anymore, serving billions of customers around the world, without being connected to the major issues of the day. Trends in technology, supply and demand, social issues, impact our businesses right across the globe. For instance, the growth in US shale gas has led to greater supply, which has impacted the whole world, from South America to Africa through to the Far East. Widening of the Panama Canal is allowing product from the US into the Asia-Pacific market, and it's creating a new pricing dynamic in this part of the world. Importantly, a greater awareness of the negative impacts of poor air quality is driving government policy in favor of cleaner fuels. And you only have to think of the media coverage of the smog here in Delhi, or even in places like London, and the response of the policymakers to that. Economic and population growth in countries with little energy infrastructure, pipelines, for instance, lead to greater demand for energy and increasingly for clean energy. Now, I want to talk about the synergies between LPG and natural gas. But before I get into the details of that, I want to take a quick look at future energy challenges. And I really want to look at how energy impacts people, human beings, because ultimately, whatever we want to achieve in life, people are essentially the end goal for all of us. Now, for many of us gathered here, it's probably difficult to imagine that about half the planet doesn't have access to clean energy. Some 3 billion people in the world rely on wood, coal, charcoal, animal waste for cooking and heating. And it's a major barrier for eradicating poverty and for building shared prosperity. One of the key aspects that India's COP21 commitments was increasing energy efficiency and saving 10% of current energy consumption by 2018. A switch to LPG, gas, can achieve this. For instance, cooking with LPG in India is 3 times more efficient with LPG than using an electric stove. And fossil fuels often get a bad press as far as climate change is concerned, and certainly when you look at coal-fired power stations or oil-based heating systems, they can have a negative environmental impact. But what many commentators are now realizing is that LPG and natural gas need to be considered separately. They can be, and we've heard it many times, a bridge to a cleaner future. But let's put CO2 to one side. Poor air quality has the most immediate and tangible impact on our lives in the form of smoke and smog. About 4 million people die every year from outdoor air pollution. Think again here in New Delhi. Much of the outdoor air pollution is transport related, something that can be addressed quickly and easily using gas for transport. And don't think that you can avoid air pollution by going indoors. Annually, more than 4 million people die every year from indoor smoke. And that is more than the number of people who die from malaria, from HIV/AIDS and tuberculosis combined, which is a phenomenal statistic. India is the leader in many things now in the world, but something that you're probably not so proud of is India is now the world leader in death from indoor air pollution. Over 1 million Indians now die every year from indoor air pollution. The last challenge I want to talk about is urbanization, which presents a massive challenge globally. And to put this in perspective, current global urbanization levels are equivalent to building a city the size of New Delhi every 4 months for the next 40 years. And just try to imagine the energy challenges of providing clean, modern energy to cities of that size. So what this all essentially brings to us, I would say in one word, is opportunity. It's opportunity for the industry, but it's also, if we can switch people from dirty fuels, it's an opportunity for the planet. In the time that I have left, I want to talk quickly about the LPG industry. I want to talk about some specific opportunities, and I want to talk about LPG and natural gas in the concept of partnership. I see LPG as the partner for natural gas, and I think we can go further if we work together. Well, the LPG industry, many of you know, it's a co-product of the production of gas and oil. In terms of consumption, we're up almost 4% in the last years. We employ about 2 million people around the world, serving about 3 billion consumers, or nearly half the planet. And the value of our business globally is above $300 billion a year. It's essentially natural gas in a bottle. It can go anywhere with minimal investment in infrastructure. It can go from urban centers to remote regions, and this is what makes it so special. It is the first step in creating a gas market. And when you look at this part of the world, India, the rural population of India is greater than the population of the European Union, the United States, and Canada combined. And it's a growing population. And if we want to gasify, if we want to bring gas to this population, the first way we're going to do that is going to be with LPG. In terms of volumes, LPG globally still outpaces natural gas, which is a surprise to many people because LNG is always seen as the big brother. But as I said before, I think in this respect, we're partners. If we look at trade flows, the black line here represents where we are now, and you see that as we look forward, we expect to see a considerable amount of LPG supply coming to the market. And if you look at price, and this is similar to the price of gas and energy in general, we've seen a steady decrease in price and a rather flat price in the last year. And price is an opportunity for the consumer. We mustn't forget that. It can be a challenge for the producers, but it's an opportunity for market development when it's low. Before I talk about opportunities, I want to set the context in terms of the UN. In 2000, the United Nations Millennium Summit created 8 development goals, and energy wasn't one of them. And over the years, we realized that in order to achieve the development goals, energy was required in nearly all of them. So at the recent 2015 goals, they have a specific goal on energy. Now, I think that's great news. But we should be careful because many commentators see electricity as synonymous with energy. And whilst electricity access is very good, it is not synonymous with energy. Looking here, you see that many of the low power energy demands that we have can easily be met with electricity. But when it comes to thermal uses, things like cooking, things like heating, electricity is not the ideal fuel. The capacity infrastructure that you need to put in place for thermal uses, it means that gas is a far more efficient fuel for thermal needs. And the needs for thermal fuel is a challenge in its own right. If you take a look at this family, or this couple here, a couple from East Timor, it's not far from here, and stacked behind them is the fuel that they've collected for 6 months of domestic consumption. Now think of the health impact that that will have when they burn that fuel, let alone the deforestation impact that that has of these families continuously reducing the forest for their fuel. This is the challenge that we face and that they face. Now, one of the cost-effective ways for reducing death from cooking is providing people with clean fuels. According to the International Energy Agency, clean cooking can save over 3 million lives a year by 2040, with an investment of about $2.5 billion per year in that period. And if you just put that in context, currently the world spends about $25 billion a year combating malaria, HIV/AIDS, and tuberculosis. 10% of that could address more people who die from pollution coming from dirty fuels. And I can tell you right now that nowhere near $2.5 billion per year is being invested in this sector. So this is an area that we need to focus on. If we look at where future growth is likely to come from, GDP growth is a strong indicator of future demand. And you can see here that China, India, Indonesia, as we look forward to 2050, are the countries where we're going to see the largest growth relatively in GDP. And the other area that's going to drive demand is population growth. By 2050, Africa will have the same population as the Americas and Europe combined, and Asia will be 3 times larger. So keep this in your mind, these are the areas where demand for clean energy is going to come from. And now if you look at where natural gas is currently present, you'll see that those areas where the future demand is going to be, it's not currently well served, and because of the infrastructure costs, it's not going to be well served in the short term. And here, I would say, is our opportunity for partnership. With just 4 cylinders of gas, we can provide the equivalent of the fuel that you see behind. So here is the opportunity for the individual. In order to meet the challenge, the WLPGA has created a project called Cooking for Life, where we intend to switch 1 billion people to cooking with gas from traditional fuels by 2030. This program is currently chaired by the current chairman of Indian Oil, Mr. Ashok. And we looked at the target countries, and the top is India. Beyond that, we have China, Bangladesh, Indonesia, but a lot of countries in this region where people do not have access to clean fuels or grid-based energy systems. And one of the leading countries is India, as far as this is concerned. In the last few years, India has put an enormous amount of effort into providing LPG access principally for cooking. Many of you know the Pahal project, providing LPG access to 50 million poor families by 2019. The Prime Minister himself publicly backs the use of LPG, and the government has released $1 billion for this program. India is becoming a country of gas consumers, but it's becoming a country of gas consumers starting with LPG. And this is what we want to replicate in countries around the world. Quickly, I would like to say it's not just cooking. LPG is used in all number of things, as is natural gas. We see a growth in the world now, LPG for power generation, with gas turbine projects, for instance, in the Virgin Islands and in Ghana. And these projects are created with the mind that when natural gas comes along, natural gas will take over and fuel these turbines. We've talked about gas for transport, and at the end of last year, there were about 27 million LPG vehicles on the world and about 23 million natural gas vehicles. And together, they still represent less than 5% of the vehicle market share worldwide. Yet the focus of policymakers and opinion leaders is increasingly on electric vehicles. And if you look, particularly in a country like India, an electric vehicle is really a coal vehicle, because that electricity is predominantly generated by coal. We need to develop the gas vehicle market, and I would say this is a classic opportunity for the industry, the LPG and the natural gas industry, to work together with joint advocacy to grow this opportunity. The last point, LPG and natural gas as complementary fuels. The fact is they're produced together. Consumers don't really see any difference when they use them. The only difference is that they're separated at source and they're transported and marketed differently. They can both contribute to regional socio-economic development. Importantly, LPG can be a precursor fuel in new markets. They can provide an alternative in off-grid areas where natural gas will never go. They can provide flexibility to industrial customers. And when you have natural gas, air, synthetic gas mixtures, they can effectively provide natural gas grids where natural gas can't yet go. So in conclusion, the world has significant energy challenges which affect people. And gas can affect many of them now, wherever you are in the world. LPG supply is increasing, price is easing, and the opportunities for gas development will start with LPG. So I would call on the gas industry to come together to realize these opportunities. And joint advocacy for gas is going to be key to create the enabling policy environment and also the consumer demand. If you want to know more about LPG, we're going to be holding our World Forum in Marrakesh next year, and we would like to work with you to see how LPG and natural gas can go further together. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now with our last speaker, Dr. R.K. Malhotra, Director General, Petrofed.
Good morning, dignitaries on the dais, the delegates. In this gas session, towards the end, I just want to share with you what we in India have started as a Gas for India campaign. As you have heard, even the Prime Minister yesterday announcing that we really need to move forward towards gas and want to increase the gas share in India, which is currently about 7% only in the total energy mix, to about 15% in next few years, while the global share is around 24%. So CII, the Confederation of Indian Industry, Petrofed and Natural Gas Society came together and decided that how we can take it forward and how we can build up the public opinion about it. A survey was also conducted by us together with the ION, and we looked at the new pricing regime for gas, whether further tuning is required, gas usage, CO2 emissions, the path ahead, what needs to be done more in this area. And the public survey showed one of the, there were several aspects of it. Because of the time constraint, I'm only highlighting one of the, that we have signed the INDC targets and we have commitments. And most of the survey people, 58% felt that perhaps moving towards gas is one of the easiest way to combat and meet the targets of INDC and reduce the carbon dioxide emissions. So that came out very clearly in the Indian survey. Next is not moving. What is it? This slide is, yeah, we can move from here. In this gas campaign, we have the following objectives that, as I said, transforming India to a gas-based economy. And we have to really, in this context, create a public perception towards gas use because it is cleaner, affordable, and available. The perception is that cleaner is only from the way of usage, that environment will be clean, but we have to also tell that overall CO2 emissions will be down much cleaner than coal. I think I need not elaborate to this audience. And then affordable, that's a real question whether it is affordable or not. People have to be really, brought this aspect that India can save. I was looking at one of the estimates that $3 billion of import bill can also perhaps be saved if we move towards gas and replace the liquid fuels by gas. Some of the estimates my friend Mr. Prabhat Singh had been projecting in some of the forums that really it is even cheaper today to switch over even diesel fuel to the gas, and then it will be much cheaper. So gas also can act as a bridge towards renewables, to which India is moving at a very rapid pace. And target profiling audience under this, we have, under this campaign, we have started reaching out to the urban hubs, internet savvy people, messages amplified through various leaders, how we can, and we will be intensifying this campaign even in time to come. We are trying to reach out to the industry, including consumer associations, environment advocacy groups, and also through the think tanks and media. That's the way we are trying to move forward in this Gas for India campaign. In the media plan, first phase, which is already on, we have created Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, all these kind of things, blog-driven websites, etc. And we are reaching out. In the next phase, we'll be carrying out more of panel discussion and editorials, writing articles in the ways, print media coverage, and even the television or, the electronic media talk shows of propagating gas and bringing out the advantages which will accrue to the individuals of the citizens of this country and the country as a whole. The campaign stakeholders naturally are the government of India is also keen, as the government is intensifying and government is making a policy that we should move towards gas. The public sector entities all are working towards it, the public sector companies like GAIL, ONGC, IOCL, others. Industry associations, as we have initiated this, but besides that, the most important is that private sector hydrocarbon companies have come forward and they have joined hands with us in this campaign, and they are very actively participating. This campaign was launched on 6 September 2016 by the Honorable Minister for Petroleum, Mr. Dharmendra Pradhanji, and these are some of the pictures then when the social media campaign was launched. And under this, the outreach is already several thousands of followers are there on various Twitter, Facebook, and Gas for India websites. Besides this Gas for India campaign, we have also done a project which was supported by the British High Commission under the Prosperity Fund, and which was partnered by the Petroleum Federation of India, IHS, and ICF. We together have been doing this to accelerate India's transition to gas. That was the project title. We started this project about 6 months back, and we have really concluded there now. And under this project, time frame was June to November. We created 5 workshops we carried out, 3 in Delhi, 2 regional workshops, 1 in Bangalore, where we tried to figure out what are the new markets which can be done. And in Gujarat, we had a workshop on talking about gas hubs. And as you can see in the picture at the bottom, all major stakeholders in India's comprehensive gas survey was also done, and most of the full value chain has been studied, and most of the stakeholders have participated in these workshops. And then the key issues which have been discussed during these workshops are the affordability of the anchor segments, and then the development of the trading hubs, how it can be done, how we can create more demand centers by replacing liquid fuels, and expanding the existing markets which are already there, how they can be expanded. And then what are the issues involving the unbundling of transmission and marketing infrastructure, whether this can be shared by various companies, or what are the changes which will be required in this context. Then obtaining government help for clearances, how it can be expedited, and then the pipeline and city gas distribution system parameters, etc., for this bidding, how further need to be fine-tuned so that we can accelerate the Gas for India campaign. The next steps we also propose is to create an India Gas Forum, which will be a vertical of Petrofed, or a new society which will also be perhaps formed. And India Gas Forum will act as a vehicle of continuity with the stakeholders to have one voice for gas. And this forum will have the functions of developing multi-year work plan for sector development, engage with industry stakeholders across the gas value chain, and engage with government to seek the policy interventions. So I think I've just briefed you about how we want to take forward the Gas for India campaign. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That was a very good way to close our speakers. I thought what I would do as chairman would be to maybe make a quick summary of my reflections from each of the speakers, and then I've had a couple common themes that seem to come across from virtually everyone. Starting off, Mary, coming from a Canadian perspective and moving into new markets of LNG, you talked about it initially from a North American perspective, but then globally, reinforcing that it's more than just a bridge to the next low carbon technology. The clean energy systems of the future will involve both gas and renewables. There's lots of supply, if even oversupplied. Greater levels of trade are coming, and both of these points are good news for India. And as we heard from Dan Jurgen yesterday, there are still cycles in the world, and we're probably just setting the stage up for the next cycle, that some projects are now being deferred as a consequence of low prices, and that's probably going to come up against continued strong demand growth. And then close by emphasizing the importance of infrastructure development in India to make this gas story happen. And Mr. Mahendran had talked about the gas market as the leading expert and as a long-standing partner and supplier to the Indian gas market. Notes that the whole is important, but gas still plays a very minor role in India compared to coal and liquid fuels, but reaffirmed the importance of gas for India as an important program. He also emphasized the importance of more gas facilities and pipeline infrastructure in India, and raised an interesting point about the different approach that gas is being taken in the emerging GST legislation compared to other fuel choices. And close with the unique position of Rosgas in terms of its size, its geographic positioning, and reliability for future Indian gas demand. Richard Garland had spoken quite well about, from long experience in the natural gas and oil industry, about the current oversupply and the likelihood that this will continue for some time. But reminded again the audience that that's part of a longer term cycle. We've seen it back in 1999. We're seeing it now. We'll probably see it again, and probably some moves on the upward in between. Reminded the audience of the relationship between Petronet, Rosgas investments, and during the last cycle, and Exxon's current participation with Petronet and Rosneft with some of the Australian and other projects. I think on the demand side, talked about to 2040, developing markets which require an energy and electricity mix, with India driving probably the highest level of India's demand for electricity rising and energy rising, and natural gas certainly taking the biggest share of that demand growth. The global natural gas industry itself will be increasing substantially, with global LNG market tripling by 2040, so that's a huge jump. Whereas in India, energy needs will triple themselves, and natural gas will take that great share. Recognizing that LNG as an industry and LNG producers are adapting and will need to continue to adapt to provide added flexibility as more markets come in and more multiple jurisdictions come in place. And then as a reminder, these are long life projects, they're long cycle projects. They take 6 to 7 years to get going, so buyers and sellers need to talk now, especially given the multi-billion-dollar nature of some of these projects. And again, from India's perspective, the importance of growing its natural gas business, and of course the infrastructure to develop that natural gas business, and supporting an investment climate to do so. Frederick Barnard really talked about introducing us to Gazprom and in long trading relationship between India and Gazprom. He used the European example to show the importance of trading hubs and gas infrastructure to optimize physical gas supply and demand, and had a similar strategy in the U.S., using that European and U.S. lesson as a lesson for India, and focusing on the need for substantial increase in infrastructure. Those being hubs, those being an integrated grid, and ideally an on-share gas storage. And it painted a long-term vision where India develops a primary gas hub with global influence. Mr. A.P. Sohani, from a government perspective, talked about that natural gas still only plays a small part of India's energy basket, especially when compared with coal. And COP21 and clean air initiatives, and certainly the fog area you're seeing in Delhi pushing this, will push more gas into the energy mix. Discussed plans for India's infrastructure, terminals, and pipeline investments, and talked about ONGC's early efforts to produce Indian gas from deep sea fields and other offshore, and LNG terminals expanding from the west coast to the 3 new ones planned on the east coast. 15,000 kilometers of natural gas grid. Recognized it's been slow to get the next 14,000 kilometers off the ground, but those are now being restarted by the government. Still need to be doing more to connect those grids and the full grid to the eastern side of the terminals. And then on the consumption side, discussed again how more gas utilization to power and fertilizer sector, things like price pooling, additional stranded power-based gas capacity, and unstranding that. And finally, incentives to replace other fossil fuels with natural gas. And close by emphasizing the needs for investment. $136 billion in oil and gas by 2025, and over $100 billion by 2022. As all of us know in the industry, that's actually at midterm in terms of investment planning horizon. Mr. Prabhat Singh had talked about the 70%, 30% distribution. I really enjoyed the story. I'm a little bit of a geologist myself, so I tried to catch a bit of it. But I think what the main message was that over the last 100 years, we've only tapped about 4%, and there's a lot more left to find, develop, and use, particularly in technology. And a couple lessons from the US that are, I think, applicable for India. First, shale gas technology will leave plenty of gas for present and future generations. Second, big players are crucial. The US experience would show the benefits of India's attraction for small players. The small players are critical, they're more nimble, they can be more innovative, and they're an important part of what India should be attracting as it attracts players into the industry. And then another lesson, if you just sit back and watch, the gas will stay in the ground. So you have to push it all the time to get it into production. From an Indian perspective, it's a buyer's market. Make hay while the sun shines. You got a key to push gas infrastructure now. Don't even bat an eyelid in terms of expanding that infrastructure. And it's strong with a closed need to convert the Indian truck and bus fleet for diesel. And I thought it was a good example because, just in, again, 1 to 2 years, take the next 200,000 trucks needed in the fleet, next 40,000 buses needed in the fleet, and you've got nearly a 40 to 50% increase in LNG demand in the country in a very, very short period of time. And that's, again, the power of large numbers in terms of the size of the economy and the potential for the Indian economy. Jason Rockwell really focusing on the broad overview of the entire sector and its overall end-to-end perspective. 3 billion people in the world do not have access to modern energy solutions. COP, again, Delhi's Air was mentioned. So consider LPG, and LPG not as a competitor to gas, but as a synergy with gas. And I think that, again, some good examples, but showing especially in the case of India and other emerging and developing markets where portability of LNG is particularly well suited. It will not compete with gas. It is co-produced with gas. It will not compete with them. And again, a vision to introduce 1 billion people globally to LNG where India would be the largest target audience. Mr. Malantra would have talked about Gas for India, the CII, Petrofed and natural gas industry supporting it. The survey preference, I think it's been a pretty impressive project. By 2020 to go from 7 to 14% in a rising energy market, still short of the global gas share at 28%. But again, it was impressive. It's cross-country, it's multimedia, it's multi-event, trying to get to more than 1 billion people with some key issues, again, affordability, infrastructure, and more reform. So quickly, as I go through those, there were some common themes. Both the supply and demand fundamentals point to very strong story for gas, particularly gas in India. There's a key role for gas in this post-COP21. It shouldn't be seen as competing against renewables, but be a part of the total equation. For India, you can see from this high stature audience, the global players are taking notice. But infrastructure development will be a key. Currently, only a small part of the total energy basket. Infrastructure investments need to be holistic from terminals to the consumer and require significant public and private investments for this. As we heard, more than $100 billion. Governments introduced a series of reforms across the entire value chain. Gas for India is one of many, and I think it's a very innovative and assertive enabler to reform the energy policy landscape. Government of India will need to continue this reform. It's a huge opportunity for investments, again, more than $100 billion, both from the public sector, but as we heard, being asked for from the private sector. So it is a challenge, but as you see from the size of the market, it's a great opportunity. Thank you. So with Mary, I think you want to open for Q&A.
We did. I was asked to relate the one question that we had, though, so at the risk of being between you and a break, I will do that. And really just to paraphrase the question is to Mr. Singh is, should some of the focus be towards renewables, not just on gas, and should the domestic companies be expanding their base to include that in their business model?
The question is that we should focus on renewables as well as rather than gas. Is that?
Or maybe both and.
Okay. No, I think the question is very valid because I have gone through one of the professors from Stanford University who's been canvassing about the role of renewables, which is solar power. And what is indicated is that in case today the price of producing power at the rooftop is going to be so cheap that it will be less than the wheeling cost of any power being produced by a fossil fuel. So you can imagine that even if the fossil fuel is at zero cost, then the power produced from that fossil fuel is going to be costlier than the power produced by the solar. So, but the challenge today is going on that how to conserve that, how to store that, how to make it portable. Now all that technological development is going on, and in the exponential growth of technology, as you've seen recently, which is happening, it is not really far away that this may become a reality. So overall, we really need to be aware of this, but then there is time at least for 5-7 years which we are looking at. So we look at all these concepts with proliferation in gas as well. And like I mentioned in my discussion also, that gas is going to be a complementing fuel. So we must try and develop the gas part in such a manner that in case there is a transition happening after a decade, then we can very quickly and easily go into that. For instance, I was telling Mr. B. Ashok the other day that there are around 35-40,000 retail outlets for IOC. Why don't you give Petronet also a small part of wherever we can possibly, and till the time the solar comes and we start selling batteries, we can try and do something with LNG at that point of time, else we can sell hot dogs till the time when we get batteries to us.
Thank you. Good. So I think we're ready to close this session, and thanks to everyone for their thoughts and contributions.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Mary. Thank you to all our panelists. As we close this session, I would like to request all our